Hey, good morning, everybody. How are you? It's me, Robert Phoenix, broadcasting to you live and direct from the Hill Country, Fredericksburg, Texas, where it is a crisp 28 degrees this morning. We had a little bit of a freeze last night, and I know a lot of the continental U.S. and obviously North America going through a bit of a chilly time, as it were. Getting ready and prep for the grand solar minimum, no doubt. One of the things that is quite often not mentioned in the public debate around climate change, just where exactly is the climate changing to and how is it changing? Because their model for global warming just basically went completely awry. Error. So we are headed towards a grand solar minimum, which means that things are going to get a bit cooler here. And what we're going to be witnessing is the erratic nature of the weather itself. So yeah, we are definitely going to be experiencing some climate change. And I got to tell you, eliminating all the carbon, all the CO2, whatever excessive gases or emissions or petroleum products and fuels, whatever sort of grand and histrionic gesture that there is towards these ends, will amount to squat, because we are headed towards a cooling cycle. Historically, things are cooling off. Okay, so that said, good morning. I hope everybody's staying warm this morning, kind of toasty. If you're out and about, I hope you're bundling up. Let's check in with Chatlandia. We got, Carl? Hey, Carl. There's Uncle Glenn, and there's Isla and Ian. Hi, Ian. Good morning. There's Donna Spicer, and then there's Shari. Hi, Shari. Isla and Denise. Hey, Denise. There's Judy, cold in her part of the world. Miranda, Diana, Tamara, and let's see who else. Maurice. What's going on, Maury? So warm here. All right, what are you down in Florida, Maury, today? Is that where you are? Neptune conjunction Nancy Pelosi's Mercury. Oh, is it Miranda's birthday? Oh, happy birthday, Miranda. 36 today. You're a youngin', as they say down around these parts. You're a youngin', Miranda. It's good to have a little youth in the Chatlandia gallery. Let's see who else we have here today. We got Santa Speaks, and where are my sheriffs? Where's Ani and Steve? The sheriffs aren't in town. Okay, hopefully they'll show up. Yeah, happy birthday, Miranda. So that makes you an Aquarian. Very interesting sign. Am I right? I think so. So the aftermath. Let's get into some topics today. We're going to get into kind of the latest on Corona, and I'm going to show you kind of an interesting little factoid that might be factoring into how this thing has spread. And it's actually a kind of a foreshadowing, and maybe you want to be able to factor this into how you're going to respond to any kind of public calamity or crisis around Corona. A little bit of alliteration for you this morning. Before I do that, there was somebody I wanted to bring into the discussion today. That I want to do a little astrology today too. Let me do that. Let me start off with some astrology, and I wanted to bring in a character that is a key figure here in the Corona story. Let's see. All right, let's do a little astrology. I got the chart of the moment, and let's bring that up. I do like to get into a little bit of astrology. Here we go. Here we are. Chart of the moment, just before I signed on today. The one thing that was really catching my eye about today's chart is down here with that moon conjunction with the true node. So it's this is probably, let's see, how many more moon conjunctions in Cancer we're going to have before May. So we have, let's see, February, which is now, obviously. And then we have March, April, then May. I think we're going to have at least, what, 5 more conjunctions. So every time the moon begins to conjunct the true node, of course, we're going to have some, well, it won't be true opposition because all these planets are kind of in latter degrees of Capricorn. The emphasis is going to be on security and safety and values that are connected to that Cancerian emotional and mental mind state. This is kind of an interesting aspect now, especially in the shadow of the so-called coronavirus. And I was cruising the internet last night and found an admission by somebody who's working for law enforcement in the New England area, and they've had emergency meetings around Corona. And there are only 2 other emergency meetings that this person has attended in their tenure since they've been in law enforcement. One was for 9/11, and the other was for the Boston Marathon, which ironically were 2 events that are highly suspect in nature, and perhaps it links all 3. Nonetheless, there was a great deal of emphasis put on how they're going to respond moving forward. So what I was able to glean was that they are very prepared to deal with any sort of public movement. Let's put it that way. When I say public movement, it meaning that they're getting ready to have to deal with people who are either, number 1, freaking out, or number 2, refuse to follow orders. So keep that in mind. And they've just reopened about 4 bases, again, theoretically, to be used as quarantine centers, one of which is just south of me in San Antonio called Lackland. So I'm just giving you some updates here as to what's going on with the planning side of this thing. So when I look at this true node in conjunction with the moon, there's a heavy duty emphasis on these Cancerian kinds of ideas, strategies, emotional hooks around being prepared, getting prepared, right? So I would not be surprised if you were out and about today, and let's say you're at Walmart or Costco, I would not be surprised at all if you saw people in heavy duty prep mode. It would not, right? I mean, you should be in heavy duty prep mode, at least light prep mode to begin with. I've talked about this for a long time. Everybody needs at least 30 days worth of food and water, minimum, just in case something happens. You never know what's going to happen. It could be a natural disaster. There could be any number of events where if you got 30 days of food and water, at the very least, you can buy yourself some time and figure out kind of how you're going to get to the next sort of phase of whatever is happening. The other thing too is that you probably need to really make some connections with your neighbors. And this is one of the things that's quite difficult, by the way, because most people either don't know their neighbors or don't get along with their neighbors. We live in these communities for the most part where we're thrown together And we are very different people with disparate points of view, different dispositions. So this is kind of the crapshoot of the haphazard nature of how communities, in many cases, not all, by the way, in many cases develop. Even that said, you should be connecting more with the people around you. At the very least, get to know their names, right? Because if some shit went down, at least you could call them by their first name, which would be a pretty good thing. So we have this point now where there's a high degree of security, emotional security, and taking care of those Cancerian needs and items. So we've got the opposition with Jupiter, and I would say right now that there would be even alerts that people might be hoarding things, because we get into that Jupiter opposition, it's about more, 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 more. So keep your eye on the news cycle about people buying stuff up, whether it's gloves or masks or Lysol or whatever. I think we're going to start to see the hoarding dialogue come into the vernacular here. And then we have the moon opposition to Pluto and Saturn coming up today and tomorrow. Actually, today, tonight, and early tomorrow. And then we're going to have a moon phase shift over the weekend. It goes full into Leo. And this is going to be a very interesting opposition. You know, and there's a lot going on politically as well. We just had this State of the Union address. We had the theoretical end of the impeachment process, which I don't believe is the end. I think the Democrats and Nadler and Schiff and Pelosi and, you know, that gang playing that role are going to continue to go after Donald Trump all the way up through the election. Now, there are some key things that you want to pay attention to, and the key date, rather, and one of the key dates is that in June, apparently, that's the soonest that the Supreme Court will rule on Donald Trump's tax returns. So keep that in mind. And that's another kind of sword of Damocles that's hanging over Trump's head. And remember, he's got Algol on his midheaven, which we've talked about before. And the sword of Damocles and the guillotine, it's the same effect. There always seems to be this sword hanging over Trump's head. Is it a holdover from the quote unquote French Revolution and that Jacobin era, which we looked at on a couple of shows during the Sunday Night Astro Live? Possibly. But there has never been a sense through his presidency where that sword has not been dangling over his neck. And I don't think it's going to abate. I think it's going to stay there all the way through this upcoming election cycle, which I have my doubts about the election cycle actually being a normal election cycle. We've already seen sort of the presage of what's to come with what we saw in Iowa and how everything was fucked up thanks to Mayor Pete's sneaky app. And what we're looking at there is some level of predictive programming. Like, this is where it's headed. You know, we're going to be dealing with these malfunctions in the system. And that's just one thing. There's other stuff going on. You know, we got a Venus retrograde this summer. We have a Mars retrograde this summer. We've got a big freaking eclipse happening on July 5th. And this is all in the run-up to the election, the 2020 election. And so I have my doubts. And even the Democrats and, you know, what that side of the left hand and the right hand are doing, they're starting to already question the results of the 2020 election. They're already questioning the results. So we're right now, we're in the shadow of Mercury retrograde, and Mercury's going to go retrograde shortly, later this month. Let me get you the date on that. I'll just pop this up here. A little ephemeris action. So we've got Mercury going retrograde right here, the 17th. So we're talking 11 days from now. We're in the shadow phase, and I guess we could attribute the fuck up in Iowa to a little bit of Mercury retrograde shadow phase. I attribute it more to Mayor Pete and his app and his desire essentially to rip the election off from Bernie Sanders, because that's what it looks like it's happening. By the way, apparently Bernie Sanders voted against the USMCA. It's one thing I actually kind of agreed with Sanders. And I think he's a con artist. He makes a shitload of money off of running for the presidency. Like, he'll make a lot of money. Anything that he doesn't use. By the way, have you seen any TV ads for Bernie Sanders? I haven't. I mean, maybe it's because I live in Texas and they target this stuff, but I haven't seen any TV ads. I've seen Michael Bloomberg ads, and I still live in Texas. What's he spending his money on? That's what I want to know. He made a shitload of money from the last election. Bought himself a brand new house, $3.5 million house. Not bad, right? So if you run for president and you get a bunch of money donated to you for your campaign, you don't have to pay it back. You don't have to pay it back. So Bernie's in another potentially very lucrative cycle for his campaign. And I don't know what's going on with Joe Biden. I don't know. Is he getting money now? I don't know if he's getting money or not. He was, I think, the leading fundraiser for the Democrats. That's a scary thought. Anyway, astrologically, we have Mercury retrograde coming up, and it's going to be in Pisces, which is not my favorite retrograde, with Mercury in Pisces. Slippery slope, right? Well, I'll talk more about that probably on Sunday night if you want to tune into the Sunday night show. We got the full moon coming up this weekend in Leo, and normally it's a pretty interesting full moon. Normally, we're kind of coming out of February a little bit, and there's a sense that the days are getting longer, and that Leo full moon is sort of broadcasting to the northern hemisphere that the sun is beginning its return. And along with that, generally tends to be kind of a bit of a boost in our attitude and our emotion in what is kind of the part of the dark, even though the 23rd, 22nd of December, one of the darkest times of the year. Statistically speaking, I think right around the 14th or 15th of February, there's kind of like this real drop off in terms of people's emotions. Apparently it's a highly depressed time. But this year with the full moon right around the 17th, you could get a bit of an emotional boost. However, there's a lot going on in the background right now. There's a lot of programs that are being run currently in the background. And I'm going to get into some of them today. So I wanted to bring this character, I guess that would be the right word. Why don't we call him a criminal? Why don't we call him a thief? Why don't we call him a traitor? So this is from the website called Nature. Pretty benign website. Harvard chemistry chief's arrest over China links shocks researcher. Nanoscientist Charles Lieber allegedly lied about his involvement in China's 1,000 Talents plan. So if you follow my stuff on Facebook, or if you're part of the 11th House group, you know that I posted this guy's picture in his story yesterday. For those of you that don't, I'm bringing it to you here. Researchers have reacted with shock to the arrest of Charles Lieber, a prominent Harvard University chemist and nanotechnology pioneer who has been charged with making false statements to the US government about receiving research funding from China. Lieber, who is known for engineering new nanomaterials and developing their applications in medicine and biology, was arrested on 28 January. That's not long ago. Two days later, a federal judge approved his release on cash bail of US $1 million. So this guy was released on bail, and they needed to put up $1 million bucks to get his butt out of jail. It's a lot of money. So Charles, either number one, has a little bit of a stash, which I wouldn't doubt, or number two, the people that have supported Charles over the years have decided that they're going to pop for his bail and his freedom. It's a lot of money. Charges focus on Lieber's alleged involvement in China's Thousand Talents Plan, a prestigious program designed to recruit leading academics to the country. Documents outlining the charges allege that Lieber received hundreds of thousands of dollars from, guess where, the Wuhan University of Technology, WUT, in China, agreed to lead a lab there. So who do you think they hired as one of their consultants to build their level 4 lab in Wuhan? This guy right here. Okay. Then when the U.S. government agencies asked about his involvement with the program, he stated that he was not a participant and denied any formal affiliation with WUT. Lieber's legal team did not respond to Nature's request for comment. The arrest comes as U.S. authorities are increasingly scrutinizing universities' foreign links amid fears that overseas governments could be stealing intellectual property by influencing U.S. research. You think? So here's the shockwave. Colleagues and former students of Lieber contacted by Nature are stunned by the detainment of such a high-profile scientist. This is a guy at Harvard, right? He's the head. He's the department. Look at this. He's the chair of the university's Department of Chemistry and Chemical Biology. So this guy is a mover and shaker at Harvard. Like if there's a pyramid, Charles Lieber is near the top in terms of research, right? He's near the top of the capstone there. He's a player. His work, which has included development of nanometer diameter wires that can be used as sensors, isn't that wonderful? Little nano arrays. They have their little sensors so they can figure out where to go and who to hook up with. He says, so won him the 2017 NIH Director's Pioneer Award and the 2012 Wolf Prize in Chemistry. 2008, he was tipped by Thomson Reuters as a potential Nobel Prize winner. So this guy has some academic and research clout. He is a whale. Charles is the purest scientific scholar I have ever seen, and personally, I have 100% trust and confidence in him. I think there must be some misunderstanding during the handling of the case, says Zhao Zhang, a former student of Lieber's, who is now a biomedical engineer at Tufts University in Medford, Massachusetts. I was shocked, says Joshua Saines, a molecular biologist at Harvard, who has co-authored 2 papers on the use of electronic devices to measure nerve activity in the mouse eye with Lieber. What the fuck? Oh, man. It takes a certain kind of mind, right, to be able to get into the measurements of the activity in the mouse eye, electronic devices. So you stick up, basically what they're doing is they're sticking a little tiny sensor, behind a mouse's eye so they can model it and use it and upgrade the model to be able to use it for humans and essentially like be able to track what you're looking at. It's like really they're dealing with an internal surveillance system right behind the eye. Like who needs all the freaking cameras? We don't have to worry about all that very expensive hardware technology, although they'll probably still want to buy that because obviously people will be profiting off of it. Why don't you just stick the camera right behind the eye so that everywhere you go, you're already being followed and observed. Wonderful stuff here. Just absolutely groundbreaking, wonderful freaking stuff. Here we go. The charges brought by the U.S. government against Professor Lieber are extremely serious. A spokesperson for the university told Nature, Harvard is cooperating with federal authorities, including the National Institutes of Health, and is conducting its own review of the alleged misconduct. Here we go. Links to China. Details of Lieber's alleged offenses appear in a charging document submitted by the FBI in connection with his arrest. It says that for periods of time between 2012 and 2017, Lieber agreed to be paid a salary of $50,000 per month, as well as about $150,000 a year in personal living expenses by Woot. It was given more than $1.5 million to set up a research lab there. So who do you think helped set up the level 4 lab? It's this guy. It's this guy. So again, where the coronavirus started in China, Charles Lieber built the facility to hatch this thing. Now, there's also connections, by the way, with Charles Lieber and Harvard and Winnipeg, where they have, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is it the Fort Stockton facility, which is the big facility. It's like the second largest in North America. And this is a facility where the 2 Chinese nationals were escorted out because of they're getting busted by taking material out of that facility and then taking it to China. So there's a link between Lieber and Harvard, that facility in Canada, because more than likely it would be much easier to take the stuff out of Canada than it would be to take it out of the US. I'm just presupposing here. So there's a link here between the two. So Lieber, more than likely, is one of the fathers of the coronavirus. What do we have here? Find that. So here we go. At the same time, let me read this here. Continue. Lieber also agreed to host visiting scientists for 2-month stints at his U.S. lab, according to the FBI, an agreement that Harvard was not aware of. So this guy's running a rogue program. I think this happens more often than not. You have these top research scientists who are treated like gods and courted by the military-industrial complex and big pharma, and they're basically given free passes, look the other way. Maybe they come up with some very interesting, genome or patent, and the school can kind of piggyback on it and make money off of it. I mean, this is a capitalist program that is probably one that needs to be revisited. And in my estimation, Charles Lieber, this guy, is right up there with Jonathan Pollard and the Rosenbergs. He's smuggling secrets, material that the Chinese essentially paid him for. Of course he's going to do it because he's getting paid both ways. What's the saying? You can't serve 2 masters. He's getting paid from Harvard, right? And he's also got the Chinese whale that he's attached to. The guy's a traitor. And you think he's the only one? You think this guy is kind of a rogue element in academia? The answer to that is absolutely not. I'd say it's probably more often the case that there are a number of Charles Liebers at fairly high ranking positions in academia, in the research world. This has been going on for quite a while now. Once the Clintons got in office, they just started giving shit away and selling shit away. And what they couldn't sell, now obviously the Chinese are more than willing to pay for whatever they can take. Now, the question here is, was this guy involved in a malicious intent to create a virus that could not only kill hundreds, maybe thousands, possibly millions of people? Was he contracted out to do that? Is that crooked smile the crooked smile of the population? Well, $1 million in bail is nothing to sneeze at. Another interesting, and again, relatively disturbing aspect of the coronavirus is something that just crossed my path again. So I just got to get this coronavirus stuff out of the way. You know, it's the Virgo in me. Got to deal with that. And then we can move on to some other housekeeping stuff. So this crossed my screen. This is from 27th of August. This goes back to 2019. This is from a website, Library of Congress. How about that? So this is a legit website, theoretically, the Global Legal Monitor. So China passed a vaccination law on June 29th, 2019. So this is the lead up to the coronavirus. The National People's Congress Standing Committee of the People's Republic of China, PRC, adopted the PRC law on vaccine administration, called the Vaccine Law. That's original. The official Xinhua news agency states that the law provides for the strictest vaccine management with tough penalties in order to ensure the country's vaccine safety. Before the passage of this 100-article law, provisions governing vaccines were contained in the PRC, Drug Administration Law, PRC law on the prevention and treatment of infectious diseases, and a few relevant administrative regulations and rules. The new law provides for regulatory requirements for researching, producing, distributing, and using vaccines. Such requirements, according to the legal commentator, are much more stringent than those for other drugs. It also contains a chapter specifying penalties for violating the vaccine law, which are also stricter than those for violating other drug laws. According to the law, if any violation of the law constitutes a crime, a heavier punishment within the range of punishments provided by the criminal law on the relevant crimes to be imposed, Article 79. The law mandates the launching of National Vaccine Electronic Tracking Platform that integrates tracking information throughout the whole process of vaccine production, distribution, and used to ensure all vaccine products can be tracked and verified. According to the law, China is to implement a state immunization program, and residents living within the territory of China are legally obligated to be vaccinated with immunization program vaccines, which are provided by the government free of charge. Local governments and parents or other guardians of children must ensure that their children be vaccinated with the immunization program. The law established a compensation system for abnormal reactions to vaccination. Great. A recipient of an immunization program vaccine who dies or suffers significant disability, organ and tissue damage is to be paid from the vaccination funds of the provincial level governments if the damage falls within the scope of abnormal reactions associated with the vaccine or cannot be prevented. The law will take effect on December 1st, 2019. Now, I don't have China's vaccination schedule in front of me, but were they, number one, already aware that the coronavirus was going to be released into their population? That's number one. Or number two, are the people in China who are suffering from the coronavirus, have they been vaccinated? And was the coronavirus actually in the vaccination? Because this major overhaul of their vaccination system is in sync and in alignment, timing-wise, with this so-called pandemic. Now, it was really interesting. I put up a post yesterday on Facebook, and it was the story about the doctors from Thailand that were able to cure somebody of coronavirus within 48 hours. I put it up there, and somebody basically said, "Oh, that's quackery. That's quackery, because the coronavirus, HIV doesn't exist. Gary Null has proven this." Right? Okay, well, maybe that's, maybe HIV doesn't exist in the way that it's been presented. there's an interesting crossover between things like HIV and Lyme disease and other things that are beginning to pop up right around and after that time. Epstein-Barr, which really hadn't been around very much, begins to pop up during that time. Lyme disease pops up. There are people that have made links between Lyme and HIV. In any case, it's immunosuppression. Right? That's what it is. It's immunosuppression. And that's where the HIV, this idea that you're having your antibodies are suppressed to the point where all of a sudden now these other contagions can take hold and completely wreck your body and wreck your life. But let's go back to right around 1980. I believe it was 1980, 1979, 1980, right around there. I had a cousin who was living in the Castro district in San Francisco. He was a bartender. Of course, he was gay. And during that time, there was a lot of Hep C going around. You know why that was happening. Penetration, right? That's what, there was rampant. And so they decided to implement a Hep C vaccination program. So these guys who were, basically, the habitués of these, the baths, as they call them in San Francisco, and the lifestyle, right? They're all coming down with Hep C. Of course, some intravenous drug use and sharing of needles is involved, but it was really about anal sex. So what happened is that they're okay. Well, let's get these guys cured and let's immunize them. So there were these Hep C vaccinations. They were happening in New York. They're happening in San Francisco. They're happening in Los Angeles. And guess what? Everybody, including my cousin, who was a part of that trial, they're all dead. They're all dead. And this is where the idea of AIDS really comes out of, is during that period of time. So there's precedent, obviously, where people are inoculated or a certain group is inoculated, and what they're being inoculated with is actually something far worse than the thing that they're being inoculated possibly against. So it's clearly not out of the question at all that what happened in China recently with this mandatory vaccine bill and putting everything in place, all the tracking, the ability to figure out who's been vaccinated, what happens as a result of that. It was all probably revved up and ready to go. And Charles Lieber more than likely aided and abetted what we're seeing now. Okay, so that's another piece of the corona puzzle that has not really been addressed. What has happened prior to all of this? Were people being inoculated with it, and then sit back and watch what happens? Maybe it didn't escape from the biolab like a lot of people are, speculating. Anyway, that's your corona update. Again, just stay healthy, keep your immune system up, a lot of vitamin D, a lot of vitamin K. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do. Make sure to wash your hands in public and don't touch any of your mucoid membranes. That's just a good practice in general. Just it's also a really good practice in mindfulness to think, oh, I'm about to touch my face. Maybe I can stop touching my face. Why am I touching my face? Why am I doing it in this moment? It's a way to kind of break the robotic conditioning. So we can actually use this as a bit of a spiritual practice as well, to be not so automatic in our daily kinds of reactions and tics and the things that go along with us that make up a day. Isn't that right, Jasper? The man is here. He's made his entrance, of course. There he is. Look at that guy. Yeah, he was having a moment with Rosie on the bed together. Man, those two, they love each other. Of course, they love each other when they're not tearing each other limb from limb, because they just love each other so much, right? Let me check in with you guys in chat. Let's see where you're at. Let's say, what do we have here? We got Christine. Everyone holding a freaking job or paying taxes is aiding and abetting. Let's see. Asian targeted was the ACE2 receptor, right? That apparently is getting into the system. Let's see, who else we have here? Uncle Glenn, one of these days it will release an extremely deadly bioweapon, and no one will pay attention due to the Chicken Little syndrome. Yep, absolutely. All the fakery tends to get us sort of, how do I say this? It gets us inured to the threat or the real potential crisis. It's the boy that cried wolf syndrome. We had an outbreak of polio in the 1960s, the polio vaccine. I nearly died from the vaccine, by the way. What else? I need your email. I'll send you my ages presentation. The virus basically drowns its victims by imitating an intense immune response. Keep up with vitamin B spectrum, B6 drops. Good call. Glenn, 5G is a form of a bioweapon. Absolutely. Hey, there's Ani. Lieber. Yeah, it's unfortunate, right? I mean, it's one of those things where it becomes almost like a cliche. You know, it's like, oh, we have the Rosenbergs. Oh, we have Jonathan Pollard. Oh, we have Charles Lieber. And it falls right into that category of, you know, so-called Jewish people who are stealing state secrets. You know, and it's just like, please, you know, it's almost a cliche. And people will say, oh, well, that's racist, or, you know, that's hateful. Well, no, when you look at the evidence there, I mean, that's what we're seeing. And yeah, can anybody be swayed by money, greed, and avarice so that they can, you know, basically create an act of treason? Of course they can. Of course they can. But it's just not a good look. You know, it's just not a good look. You know, it's like for me, when I see somebody that I, you know, theoretically would represent my theoretical, you know, genetic family in some ways, but I see them as being a traitor or somebody who is not dependable, you know, outright demonic. It's like, you know, I'm not going to take it personally, but I'm like, man, why are you fucking up? Like, why are you fucking that up for the rest of us? You know, like, why are you fucking that up for the rest of us? And I think, you know, every group has a responsibility to ask that question. Like, why are you fucking it up for the rest of us? You know, you better rein this thing in because, you know, as a group, theoretically, you know, we have to comport ourselves in a particular way. Self-respect, getting along, interacting with other people, you know, so that we don't fall into these cliched patterns. You know, so Ani, you're right. And unfortunately, it's, you know, kind of lines up that way. So that's my 2 cents on that. Like at some point, we got to be responsible for our own groups and our own family. Because if we're not, then guess what we are? We're complicit. We're complicit in whatever kind of real or imagined labeling or stereotype there is around our particular group. And you're complicit. You know, you've got to take some responsibility for, you know, breaking the chain. If you're not taking it, you're complicit. That's all I'll say on that subject. What do you think, Jasper? Take your responsibility. All right, let's see what we have here. Do they quarantine millions for a flu? Well, that's a good question. A lot of people get sick when they have the flu shot. My mother has always gotten the flu shot. She's always gotten sick. And guess what? When you get that flu shot, you're able to transmit that flu shot. You're a live carrier of that flu shot. Should people be quarantined? My answer would be, yeah, you get the flu shot, you know, if you get the flu shot, and I wouldn't get the flu shot. I've never gotten the flu shot. You get the flu shot, just go home. Get sick with the rest of the world, you know, kind of deal with it. Apparently, a lot of kids are sick now in schools. There's a high degree of absenteeism right now in the public school system. And I don't know if it's connected to coronavirus. And I'm not making any kinds of connections there. I'm just giving you some data and feedback from what I'm picking up. There was something else I wanted to bring into the discussion. Oh, yeah. Let's go back to the chat. I've had the flu for weeks. I got the flu when I was in California back around Thanksgiving. And man, it was hard. It was really, really hard to kick that flu. Damn sure it was hard. Let's see what we have here. Cliff High talks about B6 as part of a protocol for the virus. Good. Uncle Glenn says, must read Lab 257, disturbing story of the government's secret Plum Island laboratory. Yep, Plum Island, right across from Lyme, Connecticut. I mean, that's got to be a little shop of horrors, right? That island. How'd you like to work there? How'd you like to work on Plum Island, creating all these infectious diseases? I mean, it's just like Pandora's box. You know, this is what they're playing with. So Uncle Glenn brought something up yesterday that I wanted to follow up on. And so these are two, I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. And this is a different kind of virus. This is a mind virus, the mind virus that's been worming its way into our hearts, our minds, and our lives and our communities. And Uncle Glenn brought this up yesterday, and it had to do with what is going on with kids and porn in the internet. And I wanted to just follow up on that a little bit from yesterday. This is from Zero Hedge. And this is the dark side. This is really the dark side. And it's the pornification of America, how young girls are being groomed by sexual predators. So Uncle Glenn said you'd be surprised and shocked about what today's youth and teens are going through or experiencing on the internet. And look, you can do searches on the internet. You can find shit, and it is not hard to find. Let's put it that way. And if you're in chats or you're on Instagram, by the way, a lot of this happens on Instagram. So let's do this here. This is from John Whitehead, Rutherford Institute. The brutal reality is that a predator doesn't have to be in the same room, building, or even country to abuse a child. And that's what they're doing, subjecting children to psychological and sexual abuse. What can we do to protect America's young people from sexual predators? That's the question I've been getting asked by people. Have you read my article on the growing danger of young boys and girls, some as young as 9, being bought and sold for sex? Want to do something proactive to stop these monsters in their tracks? It is estimated that the number of children who are at risk of being trafficked have already been sold into the sex trade, would fill 1,300 school buses. While those who seek to buy young children for sex come from all backgrounds, races, ages, and workforces, they do have one thing in common: 99% of them are men. This is not a problem with an easy fix. As so many children continue to be victimized, brutalized, and treated like human cargo is due to 3 things. 1, consumer demand that is increasingly lucrative for everyone. I mean, are we not living in the Weimar Republic? You know, there was a story that I wanted to bring up last week, and it had to do with, you know, the refugee class that's being dropped into places like Sweden and Denmark and Holland and across Europe, mostly Western Europe, by the way. And once they're there, they're not always completely taken care of by the government, but they're also getting a little side hustle. And what they're doing is they're selling themselves. They're prostituting, men and women, mostly men, because we know most of the quote unquote refugee class happens to be men. So they're selling themselves. They're selling themselves for money, for drugs. I mean, it's a really it's a situation that's not going to change or get better overnight. And these are the conditions of the Weimar Republic, which is the government that was in between the government that Germany had under the Bismarck and ultimately the Third Reich. And it was rife, absolutely rife with debauchery. It was a bad environment, really bad environment. That's when the Frankfurt School starts to pop onto the scene. I mean, you read stories about the Weimar Republic, they'll make your toes curl. Like 8, 9, 10-year-old girls having to prostitute themselves because there's no money. There's absolutely no money. And then, of course, the movie Cabaret is based on that period, and that was a tame version. That was a very tame version of what they actually did during the Weimar Republic. Like people would, be witnessing live sex acts. What Bob Fosse put together is what he could put together based on the movie code at the time. It was a really dark, seedy, unpleasant time with a large group of people who've been absolutely crushed, shattered, and demoralized while the economy had been completely bankrupted due to reparations. This is what happens. This is what comes up. Those were the noxious weeds that grew in the aftermath of what happened in World War I. And we're beginning to see that now. I've been talking about this, not even beginning, it's been around for a while. I've been talking about the Weimarization of our culture. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that people are fucking demoralized. They don't have a lot of purpose in terms of their life, their vision, their focus. Money has become this, it's become even more of like, this filthy lucre in some ways. And and I'm adjusting my relationship with money and resources, trust me. But it's become this, the poison golden apple, because people that come from other countries look at, what's happening here in America, and like, I want some of this, I want some of this, I want some of this. I don't blame them. They're grown up in abject poverty and living in shit conditions, and they see the rest of the world living in a very different kind of environment. Of course, but it's become distended now. So we have that. We have, Trump talks about employment numbers. I can't vouch for whether those are real or not. I don't know. I don't know. But there's a difference between employment and underemployment. And are people being employed in jobs that give them a sense of purpose and meaning in their lives? Or are they collecting a salary? And sometimes you just got to get a job to work so you can keep the lights on. I get that. I totally get that. But I think that that there's a bigger discussion versus unemployment and underemployment. And by and large, the attitude of people, Emily's texting me. And by and large, the attitude for people, not all people, but the attitude is one of distrust. Distrust with the government. And it's been cultivated for a very long time. And if you get on board the MAGA training and you just punch that ticket and you're all in, well, I think the trust factor is not part of the equation for you. I mean, you're all in, so you've got a whole level of trust that you've bought into. But I'd say by and large, there's a huge mistrust of government in general. I mean, just look at what's been happening with the impeachment and all these other all the other related circuses, Russiagate, and really, if you're really paying attention, really paying attention, what's happened with Hillary Clinton, what happened with Jeffrey Epstein, there's a huge amount of mistrust. And trust is the fundamental piece and factor of any relationship. Any relationship, you've got to have trust. If you don't have trust, then good luck with that relationship. And trust is something that is, needs to be cultivated and treated like a really precious commodity. Because once you blow trust, you may get a second chance in some cases, It's not always a given. So we're also living in an environment overall where there's a high degree of cynicism and mistrust. You put all this stuff together and it begins to mirror the Weimar Republic. And that's kind of where we're living. Now you have these young girls and boys who go off online, and next thing you know, you've got these online predators, and there is a relationship with this in trafficking, apparently. Interesting stuff here, but very, very dark. We need to be preemptive and proactive in our understanding of the threats and smarter and more sophisticated in our responses as well. What we are dealing with is a culture that is grooming these young children, especially young girls, to be preyed upon by men. The grooming culture is ubiquitous, whether it's young girls or young boys, or whether it's young people that are being groomed to become part of the new trans society. This whole grooming strategy is prevalent. And with all these inputs from social media and the internet and not so social media to, public pressure, social pressure, all those things, they're basically machine learning and driving these identities with these young people to become something different. And it is a bit troubling. And I'm not saying we need to give up the internet, but this is something as a parent that would be probably in your best interest to really stay on top of. So in case you're keeping score at home, there are usually 6 stages to grooming a sexual predator: friendship, targeting and gaining trust. There's that word, trust. Relationship, filling the child's needs, gauging the level of protection surrounding the child, exclusivity, isolating the child from others, sexualization, desensitizing the child to sex talk and activities, and then abuse. All of these screen devices being passed along to children at even younger ages, they become the sexual predator's primary means of gaining access to young people. And it's primarily happening online. Sexual predators have found an easy access point to the lives of young people. They're meeting them online through multiplayer video games and chat apps, making virtual connections right in their victims' homes. Many of the interactions lead to crimes of sextortion, in which the children are coerced into sending explicit imagery of themselves. Indeed, video games such as Minecraft and Fortnite, social media apps such as TikTok and Instagram, and online chat forums have become hunting grounds for sexual predators. Wow. I have absolutely no idea how you stem the tide in this thing. First of all, if you give your kid a device when they're young, you're a fucking idiot. I'm sorry. You just are, because what you're doing is you're rewiring their brains at a point in time where, they really have not developed. And not only that, but they're becoming conversant in the language of the internet. They're becoming conversant and facile, being able to kind of go into areas that theoretically their friends are. And next thing you know, you've got Little Red Riding Hood and the Wolf hanging out in the chat room on Fortnite. Anyway, Uncle Glenn brought this up yesterday, so it crossed my screen, and I just wanted to, throw that out there and really make a bigger connection to the world that we're living in and the degradation and the demoralization of our culture. And it really mirrors what happened, or what happened in the Weimar Republic. So we're kind of in the Weimar Republic on steroids now. Even just look at what happened during the Super Bowl, and we had the strip show, the grinding and pole empowering women show with Shakira and J-Lo. And apparently, and I thought I saw this during Super Bowl, but J-Lo had a silver zircon encrusted Baphomet right on her chest. That doesn't surprise me. And I thought I saw it during the Super Bowl when I was, wondering how the heck the 49ers are going to, beat the NFL, not just the Kansas City Chiefs. Anyway, But again, that really showed us, right, in a lot of ways, kind of where we're at. That was a Weimar Republic kind of performance, thanks to J-Lo and Shakira. The other story that really caught my eye is, again, it's sort of related, and this is a culture that's pushing back. And I think this is quite interesting. This is from Press TV. This is in Birmingham, England. So this is quite an interesting move on the social engineers of Western Europe. And it's like, okay, let's bring in a huge number of refugees, immigrants from North Africa and the Middle East, Muslims. And while we have them in our public schools, why don't we trot out early sex education programs and get them indoctrinated in LGBT? Oh, that's a really great fucking idea. Now, what were they thinking here? What were they thinking? Are they trying to weaponize them against the dominant culture? Because it's clear now that the dominant culture is wrapped around this and enabling this deep and pervasive social engineering of kids at a very early age. It's across the board. It's happening right here in Austin. They've completely rewritten the Austin School District mission statement and script. I mean, they're going to SJW the kids from when they're in kindergarten. That's the plan now. And what goes along with all this? So-called tolerance. So let's check this out. Birmingham dad who refused to submit to his school's controversial and insensitive sexual equality policy is facing jail over his noncompliance. Jabbar Hussein, 51, refused to let his son attend school because of a protracted dispute at Parkfield Community School in Alum Rock, Birmingham, over compulsory lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender LGBT lessons. Hussein, like many other Muslim parents, refused to allow his child to attend the lessons on religious grounds. The school suspended the so-called equality lessons in March 2019, officially called the No Outsiders program, only to reintroduce them in June, a move which infuriated concerned parents. Again, they're breaking down the trust. When you break down trust, you break down everything. So they said, okay, we're sensitive to your needs. We're being tolerant. But then they said, okay, enough time's passed. Let's bring this thing back around. Let's call it something different. And let's take another whack at this, because that's what they're told to do. The concerned parents have argued that young children should not be exposed to such contentious issues at a tender age. You think? You think? Mr. Hussein faces a hefty fine to the tune of 2,500 pounds. It's about close to 5,000 American. And a potential 3-month jail sentence for refusing to let his 9-year-old son attend school where he would have been exposed to the controversial No Outsiders program. Okay, so you know what this does? You know what this does? It isolates that community even more. It doesn't allow them to, quote unquote, assimilate, because what will they do? They'll start their own schools to make sure that they're not having their kids' heads hacked by the Rainbow Coalition, who apparently now has taken over in most of the westernized nations, right? So they're going to start their own schools, and they're going to create, more of this insularity, and the ability to assimilate is going to be lost here. That's what they're doing. And they're going to be also grooming a form of radicalization. Is that the plan? Do they want to further radicalize these kind of, quote unquote, well-meaning people who have their kids in public schools? Marina Darkstar talks about this. And she talked about how her daughter, one of her daughter's best friends, is Muslim. And she has no problem letting her kid hang out with her Muslim friend because she knows that that girl is going to have her version of morality. Now, you may agree or disagree with it. You may agree with, there may be really hardcore aspects to that faith, but I know Muslim people have never had a clitorectomy. That does happen, by the way. It does happen. But she says, I can feel safe with my kid hanging out with another kid who's got some moral grounding and structure. It's a form of integration, right? They're integrating, assimilating. And she's like, okay, I'm good with that. She said that on my show. So what they're doing is they're forcing this community now to say, no, hands off. If you're going to do this to us, we're going to start our own schools. And when that happens, guess what? Then you could have further, deeper radicalization. Because what they're looking at now, square in the eye, is the great Satan that wants to get into their kids' heads and rewire their brains and rewire their future choices. I don't blame them. I don't blame this guy. Mr. Hussein is reportedly seeking a judicial review on the grounds that the controversial program is incompatible with his rights and his Muslim faith. The judicial review has been proposed on safeguarding risk grounds insofar as it allegedly promotes distorted notions of gender identity. The legal case, in addition to broader issues related to the controversial No Outsiders program, is widely seen as an example of deep communal divisions and religious tensions in Britain. Well, this is what happens. This is what happens. You bring people in with a very different moral compass, and then you try to rewire their true north with a very different kind of morality. And what are they going to do? They're going to reject it. They're going to reject it. And then what happens? Are you going to try to, normalize it? You're going to try to force a kid to go to school? What happens if that guy goes to jail? What do you think the rest of the community is going to do? And that's a community. I mean, those people will hang tight. But I see this as just that community, again, forking off and saying, fuck it. We'll just create our own schools because we don't want this to happen. And that's what happens. It's probably not a bad idea, to be frank. All right, let me check in with you guys in chat. Let's see where you're at. Get a few questions here. Little commentary. Let's see what's going on. All right, we have Lori says, I homeschool last few years for my kids. Rules got ridiculous back even over 10 years ago. Yes, they make it very, very difficult. My wife was telling me to expect drag queens in next year's Super Bowl halftime show. I could not disagree. Next year's Super Bowl is going to be in Tampa. It's going to be in Tampa. They usually try to get regional artists to perform. I wonder if Jimmy Buffett would perform. The Parrot Heads. Yeah, touch my nose. It's itchy. Could be. What about when they have drag queens as teachers at school? See, divide and conquer. Yes, indeed. What else? I would mention that point to my children's father. Tons of people leaving the public school system. That is why they're putting more and more rules against homeschooling. That is correct. What else? Bill Gates and Steve Jobs did not allow their kids to have smartphones or iPads. Well, in Steve Jobs's case, I don't know the complete ins and outs of his relationship with his daughter, but he was not very present. And by the time, again, theoretically, he checked out, Steve Jobs, where were we technologically? The iPad had not hit yet. Hadn't hit yet. Am I right? Let me think about that. Just think. It was nascent. I think the iPad was nascent during that time. It was just really starting to come in. Like, yes, that's true. Because there was a big debate over like JavaScript and XTML or XTHML. So yeah, it was around, but it wasn't really ubiquitous. The iPhone, of course, had been around since 2007. Masterstroke in a lot of ways by Jobs. But he didn't have a lot of influence over his daughter. Maybe because he was such a big barker, he was able to get his kid's mother to listen up. But Bill Gates, I could certainly see that. And you think Bill Gates vaccinates his kids? Fuck no. No way. All right, what else do we have here? We do private school. Good. Good. Let's see, what else? Nobody touch your nose. I agree with that. Totally agree. Where's Steve today? I miss Steve. Let's see what else we have here. Going back. So Isla says, I have noticed kids' movies always place inappropriate attention on the human rear end. You think that's think that's just an error? Of course they do. Yes, absolutely. Has anyone heard anything about Ruth Bader Ginsburg? Is she still around, alive? Or is that merely hiding to keep her in place as a Democratic vote? That's a really good question. I think she's probably been replaced. Whoever we're seeing is not the RBG. Hey, Emily's in the chat. Hi, Emily. Let's see, what else do we have here? Check out the teen movies. They've been over-sexualized used for 30 years. I grew up with movies like American Pie. You can screw anything and it's okay. Yeah. I'm gonna just leave a kind of on a really, how about a positive note? Because I've talked about some kind of dark stuff today. This must be Dark Thursday. It's that true node conjunct the moon. I'm getting into that protective Cancerian emotional kind of energy. So last night I was watching this movie with Alan Ladd. And every now and then I get into Western movie mode. And I like Westerns because there's some interesting morality tales, specifically when they skip the so-called slaughter of the Indians. Not a huge fan of that. So I like the morality tales that go on in Westerns because they're kind of black and white in some ways, with boundaries and consequences for action and how they respond to things. So the movie is called The Proud Rebel. It's a very interesting movie. A Confederate veteran living in the Yankee North struggles with his son's shock-induced muteness and the hate of Northerners. It's a really interesting movie, again, about assimilation, grudges, character, having to do the so-called right thing, even if it's at the expense of your family's, I don't want to say emotional well-being, but there is some of that involved. And essentially, what happens is that Alan Ladd and his son, who was actually played by his son, David Ladd, so it was a father and son thing. And that's why I think it was so emotional in some ways, because his son has this kind of mute condition, and they go to this northern town, north of the Mason-Dixon line, and they have to assimilate and be part of this this community. And initially, he's kind of badgered, Alan Ladd, by Olivia de Havilland, and eventually Olivia de Havilland comes to his rescue, and he and his son move in, and he fixes up her place and stuff like that. But one of the things that happens is that his son has to have this operation for his muteness. And in order to get some of the money, apparently dogs back then were kind of few and far between, or at least dogs that really knew how to, run the cattle and do all that stuff. There was a high premium placed on dogs. So this one guy wanted to buy the son's dog. And eventually Alan Ladd succumbs to it. And while the kid is getting his vocal cords taken care of the doctor in Minnesota, he sells the dog to pay for the operation, right? This is what happens. But then when the kid gets back and he has to tell him what happened, the kid flips out again, violation of trust. And the father knows that he did the wrong thing. So he has to go and get the dog back now. And who has the dog? This guy, Dean Jagger, who's his hated rival. And his two sons, one of them played by Harry Dean Stanton. And so he's got to go back and get the dog and do the right thing. And the reason I'm bringing this movie up is because it actually has real emotion in this film. You see the sacrifice that he had to make, and that Olivia de Havilland had to make. You just see the sacrifice that's involved, and it's a palatable, emotional piece, right? It's not shot on video. It's not shot with CGI. There are choices, there are repercussions, there are all these things that happen in that film. And at the end of the day, everything is tied together and order is restored, in the movie. But it's also more about the order inside the individual, because there's a very interesting morality play taking place inside of that movie. And I'm not using morality in the pejorative sense. I'm using it in the sense that there is something very kind of wholesome and structured and integral on every single level of that film. And I just stumbled across, I've never seen it before. And it's a very powerful movie, very powerful. If you want to see something that will ultimately make you feel good, but not feel good in a way where it's like a feel-good fluffer. If you want to see something make you feel good, check it out. It's a very good film. You can probably find it just about anywhere. And it really is a very stark contrast to where we are in terms of movie making, entertainment, and all the just, horse manure that's tossed at us. And could some people say, well, is that conditioning that took place during that time? I don't know. You look at that and you say, well, this is how people work together. This is how people bond together. This is how people stand up for things that are right. And even if they're painful, they have to redress their wrongs. It's a very good movie. I highly recommend it. And of course, there's the north-south thing that's going on there as well. And ultimately some healing that takes place. So that's what I'm going to leave you with today. Just a brief little movie review. Oh, by the way, the other thing about the movie that I found really interesting is that Harry Dean Stanton is in the movie. It's like one of his first movies. He's unmistakable. Harry Dean Stanton, God rest his soul wherever he is, that guy was ubiquitous. He was everywhere for a very long time. So that's Harry Dean Stanton's movie. And the other character that's in there is, if you ever watched Our Gang, right, the Little Rascals, there was a kid who was always a real pain in the ass in the Little Rascals. His name was Butch. He was the bully. He's in that movie. He's like, I don't know, probably about 16 years old, but looking like he's around 14. And he's playing, guess what? Bully. So you have Butch from the Little Rascals and Harry Dean Stanton in the same movie. Anyway, it's always good to be able to go back in time and time travel and have some kind of, emotional and psychic nutrition, especially when we have the true note in Cancer still. When it moves into Gemini, I'm telling you right now, we're going to be in a very different plane of existence. It'll be very, very different. So soak it up while you can. Get all the goodies while you can. Take all your nutrients, your physical nutrients, your emotional nutrients, your spiritual nutrients, and bring them all in and then share what you can with the people that you love in your life and make them feel important and loved too. All right. I'm out of here for the day. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. Thanks for checking in with me today. I'll be back tomorrow, Friday Farcast with the Crimmies. It's going to be great. Boy, do they have something planned for us. They're going to take us on a journey. They normally do. And then next Friday, it's going to be the return of Rock Castaldo. So we got some good guests coming up. Everybody that's subscribed to this channel through my website, thank you very much. And if you'd like to subscribe, you can go to my website, robertphoenix.com. It's front and center. I got some tiers there. And for people who bought the 11th House Academy, I'm having the second of 2 webinars, it'll probably be the final one. So if you bought the course in the last 6 months, jump in, send me an email, say, I want to go, Robert, I want to attend. I'll put it back up on the group on Facebook. So it'll be there as well. And that's about it for today. Have yourself a good Thursday, and I'll see you all tomorrow.